This program series is a continuation of our collaboration with the Smithsonian and Mass Humanities, part of the Museum on Main Street program that we started in 2022. So we have a series of 6 speakers. Last week we had Harold Burnham. This week we are graced with the presence of Walt Ansel from Mystic Seaport, and really looking forward to what he has to say. So take it away, Walt.
Well, welcome. It's really amazing to be here in this town, and we're deeply involved in trying to bring one of your schooners back to life now at Mystic Seaport, the LA Dunton. It's a Thomas McManus schooner that was built by Arthur Story in 1921, just 2.5 blocks from here. And she came as a working vessel to Mystic in 1963 from Newfoundland, and we had done some rebuilding on her over the years, but now we're doing a massive multi-million-dollar restoration on her and trying to put the shape back in the vessel. And I'll be talking a lot about that. Dana Story had a very close relationship with Mystic Seaport, and he helped us in the 70s and 80s, and what an amazing resource. We're sort of standing on the backs of giants here. I have the LA Dunton restoration crew here in the audience tonight, and they'll help keep me on the straight and narrow and help with questions. We have Roger Hambidge, master model maker and shipwright. He built the 2 models out in the front, and he's made the LA Dunton pretty much a lifelong study and has helped a whole lot in trying to get Dunton's shape back. LA Dunton with her summer racing rig, as I like to call it, with topsails and jib topsail. Just a few numbers here for you. She's 120 feet on deck, length on waterline 94 feet, beam 25.6, working draft 13 to 15 feet. As I said, designed by Thomas McManus. She was based on a vessel named the Joffrey that was built in 1919. And it was very common for the shipyards to take the molds and patterns from earlier vessels and copy them. And the winter that the Dunton was built, the American was built, a sister ship also the same time. And McManus did not love this because he didn't get any royalties for these copies that were built. So it's kind of unfortunate for him. But she's a Grand Banks fishing schooner, worked out of Gloucester and Boston, fished in American waters for about 14 years, and then went to Canada and finished the rest of her career up there. Just some numbers for you. Sail area, 8,000 square feet. Mainsail, 3,500 square feet. Length of the main boom, 76 feet. And the main gaff, 45 feet. And if you were a seagull, you'd be 118 feet off the water on the mast ball. First captain of Dunton, Felix Hogan. He was a partial owner, and Lewis Dunton, the Booth-based sailmaker, was a partner also, so the vessel was named after him. But Felix Hogan was a Newfoundlander. This picture was taken by his son offshore on the Dunton in the 1920s. And he was born in 1872. He was a successful and careful fisherman, never lost a man, frugal. He would buy his halibut dories in Nova Scotia because they were $2 cheaper than the American dories, and specialized in halibut fishing. So the big giant flatfish that can weigh up to 300 pounds. He tried to race the Dunton against the Blue Nose, but she was about 15 feet shorter than Blue Nose, and Hogan was not really a racer, so didn't really have a chance there. This is a picture that's probably familiar to many of you. It's a Gloucester fishing schooner in frame here, and what I love is how simple the yard is. Just a bit of timber scattered around, crude staging. They framed her up, and you can see they're starting to plank here. They're planking from the bottom up. They've got some battens lining the frames at the top and spalls to keep the frames from spreading. Um, Really, all you needed was a sloping bit of land on a small estuary bordering the farmland, which is what we have here. The main resource was a large population of highly skilled shipwrights and caulkers who have no bother building a 200-ton schooner in 4 months outdoors in the wintertime. Realized that this was mostly a ship built by hand, as steam bandsaws only appeared in the 1880s. Prior to that, they would, in the words of Dana Story, beat out the frames with broad axes. And I can't imagine the amount of physical effort required to do that. We rely heavily on our ship saws at Mystic. A.D. Story built the Dunton with 3 other schooners that winter, and they were all launched that year. And next door, the Burgess racing fishing schooner Mayflower was built in 59 days from keel laying to launching. So the town must have been just amazingly busy that winter. Here she is sliding down the ways. The church is still there, I believe. And this was in March 1921. This is a typical Story schooner side launch on greased keel blocks and support only under one bilge. There was no railway, just clever cribbing, high tide, and minimal support until the water floated the hull. Many vessels grounded in the marsh and needed tugboats to free them. One stuck vessel, after much drama and yelling, was found to be pinned to the keel blocks by over-length drift pins. Unsurprisingly, launchings did not always work as planned. The light unballasted hulls were towed to Gloucester for ballasting, mast stepping, and rigging. This is a beautiful shot by Church, glass plate negative, and you can really get a wonderful feeling for the Dunton shape and form. The schooner that's just astern of her is the Arethusa, the famous rum runner, and she's being outfitted with a bowsprit built as a knockabout. The bowsprit was added to give her more sail area. We can see that there is an exhaust port in the transom, and Dunton was built with an aperture that was filled for the little bit of racing she did, but then power was put in her almost immediately. The writing was on the wall for diesel engines being put into these long line schooners, and it was kind of the beginning of the end of sail for them. This is a wonderful beam view of Dunton in Boston. And Roger Hambidge did extensive research on trying to figure out her shear. And he used this photo because it's almost the best beam shot that we have. The car up on dock helped with the scaling. And what else do you remember using for reference when you tried to get her shape?
Part of it was on the ship itself as she sat at the seaport during that time, during our time, and some assumptions had to be made. See the white, black and white photo. It's a white stripe coming from right above the hawse pipe below the name. It sweeps all the way out, and that's plowed into the top of the uppermost waist plank, which is 3 inches thick. Above that, it's 2-inch pine forward planking. And I took that as a guide for the measurement, and then stacked those measurements midship where that break is, where that monkey rail comes down and curves down onto the main rail, and stacked those up, as I recall, to a point where placing a straight edge on the photograph from the middle of the transom taffrail which I know is 6 inches above, or whatever it was, above the main rail, to the top of the, I think it's called the buffalo rail, that's on the, above the main rail or forward, and deducted, so I had to do some little mathematical hijinks there. And so with that stack of that measurement that came from,
Well, I don't know if this will show up or not.
from this point where that stripe is to
Yeah,
there,
it doesn't, sure, show up.
so that I think was like 10 inches or something like that. So when I stack those up to a line from here to there, noting that this I had to deduct that height because I wanted to get, this was the baseline, the datum line. And so with that, whatever that measurement was, that's how much that she had come down, because she was almost at the time that I did this, she was almost a straight, these ends had come down approximately 3 feet at each end, approximately.
From the sagging timbers of the hull.
Just old age.
Yeah.
I mean, I lost 2 inches in my age so far.
This is another amazing church photo of, it's a thrilling winter photo of a Gloucesterman on George's Banks surfing down a big wave in February, also by Church Cook. The jib has been furled and triced up out of harm's way. The schooner is close hauled under storm canvas on starboard tack under foresail and jumbo, and there wouldn't be any dories set on a day like today. But that's got to be at least a good 15 or 20-foot wave she's surfing down. Imagine making a living out there under those conditions. This is how she was set up typically on the grounds. The crew's either baiting up or cutting fish back aft, dressing fish. They flew the trysail, the full mainsail was furled. Jib again up out of harm's way. And with this reduced sail area, the captain, mate, or the captain, the boy, and the cook could handle the vessel and stay in proximity with the dories.
You also notice that the topmasts are gone. They housed those down. So that was another sign of being under a reduced rig.
So Captain Hogan, he retired ashore and passed away in 1951 at age 79. And many American schooners were sold north to the Canadians, primarily because of their hardwood construction. They felt they lasted a lot longer up north, like the schooner Elsie. They were just considered superior vessels to have. The Dunton fished up there until the early 50s and then was converted to a coastal freighter. And they cut the transom off, cut off the bowsprit, put a wheelhouse over the wheel. She had a Fairbanks Morse 4-cylinder crude oil engine in her at this point. And you could see that the rig is largely reduced. She was owned by the Buffum Company in Nova Scotia and would carry coal and heating oil, flour, goods that were needed in the outports up in Newfoundland. You didn't have the roads, so you really relied on these little coastal freighters to keep you going. And she was in this configuration when she was bought by Mystic in 1963 and really considered a viable business still at that point. So I think the museum paid, it was like $25,000 for her. Still a valuable thing. And what I love is the Newfoundland crew brought her down to New London, Connecticut for the museum. And she went into Thames Shipyard and they put the schooner transom back on her. This was in 64, 65. And they brought her up the river to Mystic, put the bowsprit in, and then put that summer sailing rig, which I showed you the slide of, in her. And that's how she was until pretty much the early 70s. And then she was suffering severely from rot. And at that point, they did a retopping job in the water at Mystic. We hadn't built our lift dock yet. And unfortunately, in the process, her shear, she had started to sag. The ends had started to droop. But with the retopping in the water, really too much was taken off of her. And the shear went down 3.5 feet almost. So she was, as Roger mentioned, she was quite flat at that point. Fast forward to 2022, and we knew we had to do this massive restoration on her. So we have at the HB DuPont Preservation Shipyard, we've got a 500-ton ship lift, which is now an income stream to support saving our own vessels, restoring our own vessels. We did Mayflower over 3.5 years on our ship lift, and we knew the Dunton restoration project was going to take a long time. We didn't want to park her on the lift and turn off that income source. So what we did was we cast up a concrete pad. The whole shipyard's built on fill, so the ground is not as firm as you'd really like. That concrete pad you see with the 4 bars across, that's what we're going to set the ship on for the hauling. We drove a whole bunch of pilings down that are underneath the concrete to support her. And then the green and white steel work that you see on the ground, that is a rented lift tackle that we got out of Oklahoma for heavy lifts for bridges. And you see the nylon straps rigged on the vessel for lift day. And then there we are with 2 90-ton cranes, Liebherr cranes, and fascinating setup and lift. We actually practiced with this setup in Newport on the Schooner Coronet first. And the hull, I was on board when we took the strain and did the lift. And surprisingly enough, the hull was still strong enough that we saw hardly any movement at all. We had a few shipwrights down below, and there's a little bit of creaking, but nothing broke. So we were able to do that lift. And then the cranes are only parked 60 feet apart. So we had to essentially spin and fly the schooner between the cranes and set her on the other side. And there's the view from the other side of the concrete pad. And you can see that the shape of that hull is a far cry from the photo that Roger was talking about, her profile view from the early 1920s. So looking very different there. When she swung through the 2 cranes, one crane operator told me, he said, well, I just let my crane free swing. And I could not imagine what he was talking about. The other crane steered the vessel through, but it was kind of scary to hear. The forward lifting apparatus did knock a light off the yellow Astro crane, but the crane operators, oh, we do this all the time. Not with schooners, but so that was wild. This is a construction drawing of the ship done by Bob Allen, our naval architect who did the sail plan also. And it doesn't quite have the proper shear, but Bob's scholarship and research about the scantlings and the size of all the timbers in the vessel, just impeccable. He spent a lot of time doing this, and we use this today as a reference for sizing timber. We've also compiled a cut list for everything that we need. And we got federal money to buy well over 100 white oak trees that we have delivered, and we've been sawing them for both framing and planking. I was down in Florida a couple of weeks ago looking at live oak that have been blown over in the hurricane, marked 30 trees that are over 150 years old with crooks and also sweeps that we'll be using for her. We have 2 bandsaw sawmills on the property, so we'll be employing those to cut our live oak into the shapes that we need. This is a set of lines that Roger did for Dunton with his scholarship, and it's the she's trimmed up by the stern, not really in fighting trim. The bows down a bit, and I worked with Roger's lines and came up with a CAD drawing. I changed the trim and faired the hull, but it's pretty close to what he did. And the reason I did this was so that the concrete pad that we have is basically a baseline. We needed to get some heights. And basically, we pushed the bow up 3 feet 4 inches and the stern 2 feet 4 inches to get back to this shear line that she had originally. And we bent the vessel, which is crazy to think about. The purple line and shape represents where we started, and the black line is where we're headed with the new shape. So, let's see if I can show you over here. Should have an arrow showing it here. There we go. Thank you. Bending a 120-foot schooner. So this was over, Mike and his crew did this last winter, and this is only about half the bend in the bow. I did it with 50-ton hydraulic jacks. The deck was taken off the vessel. The caulking was all pulled out down below. The scarfs were unbolted in the backbone. And pretty amazing that you can do that. The deck beams were left in, and I love this. It makes me seasick. Look at down below. Surprisingly flexible. We picked a portion on the port side of the vessel, midships below the heavy bilge planking, and we put in handicap access, a wheelchair elevator, and that goes up into the fish hold floor. You'll see that here. This is new sections of oak keel going in. The bow has been pushed up to the height that we need. The stern, not yet. There's the elevator. The oak came out of Ohio. It pieces were up to 40 feet long. Very hard to find. By the time we got those sticks here, they cost us about $10,000 each. So pretty amazing to think about. Not only was the purchase price high, but the shipping of material that big halfway across the country costs quite a bit. The steel that you see forward is holding her up, and it has cross pieces that go under the clamp forward so that we can have free access to rebuilding and replacing the backbone. And you'll see more of that later in the next slide. All right, this is where we are now. So we have bent the stern, bent the bow, and we're pretty much there. This is from a drone shot that was taken 2 days ago, and you'll see aft where the X is above the green box. We've got steel running across the vessel right there. Those I-beams are underneath the clamp in that area. So we're pushing those posts. And then aft where it says Thames Keel on the end of the little building there, you'll see their jacks at the bases of those posts there also. All right. See if I can get this drone footage to play here. There's a new stem inner at this point and stem knee. Ophelia made the stem, carved it out of live oak. We are using live oak in the more critical timbers on the boat that are going to be exposed to fresh water or in places where there's little ventilation. The white paint is an attempt to keep the moisture inside, slow down the drying out. The project this long, you really have to worry about the large oak timbers moving and checking on you. So that's what that's all about. But you can see that the shape is really developing there with her. We have a section of deck left amidship for our visitors. I was told that we have to keep her looking like a Gloucester fishing schooner through the whole project. So that keeps us from cutting off large parts. And it's a challenge. It makes the job more complicated and slower, but it's really, I think the visitors really appreciate it. And they love seeing us working on the vessel.
Do you want to point out the difference in the rabbit line?
If you look up, yeah,
No.
look at the shape there. It's amazing. She's come a long way. Roger was talking about the, stop this. If you look aft above the green box, you'll see a section of white paint above the propeller aperture. The rabbit has been exposed by about 8 inches there. And we're going to bend the deadwood afterwards. We sort of left the run of the vessel and the deadwood working as a hinge point.
Let's see it come.
Yeah.
But I had one of the fellows at the shipyard who was an electrical steel structural engineer told me that you're lifting the whole boat up, you're not bending it. Right? It can't be done. That's physics, it can't be done. A steel boat, yeah. This is a wooden boat. It's a whole different operation. So that actually is a visible proof that keel stayed right exactly where it was, and the rest of the hull came above it. And that's that section of. So this part of the hull right there used to be down there. Yep, that's how much it was raised up.
So our president's told us that we're sailing the vessel in 2030. We'll see how that goes. A long way to go. we have a small crew here, and it's kind of like, well, if you want to do that, show us the money. But it's a really amazing project. I've been involved with the seaport for over 30 years, and to just one of my dreams ever since I stepped on her deck to see her under sail. I think a dream shared by a lot of people.
Yeah, mine. Can I interject something?
Yeah.
So I started at the seaport in 1973, and my first job was actually on the Dunton, mucking out the whatever that stuff was between the frames all the way down the bottom. It was like wet coffee ground with worms in it. That was in 73. But the Charles Morgan, the whale ship, was embedded in a sand and gravel bed up at the north end as a static display of a whale ship, as a generic whale ship. As the years went by, and we did a lot of work on it, and I did a lot of work on the Morgan myself, she became the Charles W. Morgan from 1905 or something like that. We did what I'm getting at is I actually sailed on that ship in 2013, was it now? So when I first started, she was embedded as a generic whale ship in a gravel bed. Mm-hmm. And so what Walter was saying about her sailing, if we could sail the Morgan, we could certainly sail this one.
Well, any questions? Yes.
Just wondering how much of the original vessel will remain intact? Is the whole thing going to be replaced, or are there portions of it that will?
So we got a federal grant to take the interior out. And that's where we started after the crane haul. And really, with the shape change, and she's had numerous rebuilds since then, I would think that we're probably only going to be able to save about 10 or 15% of her. Yeah. Yeah.
What does a project like this cost?
Well, I think Harold could answer you on that one.
Have you ever seen a similar size? Around $6 million.
The sale costs quite a bit more, so I would say that doing the basic hull and getting her back together as a floating exhibit, about $6 million, but if you want to sail it, it's going to cost you another $3 million. We have to work with the Coast Guard. I would love to see her sail more frequently than the Morgan. We had to take the Morgan to New London and ballast her to a depth that would never get up our river to sail her safely. But Dunton, certainly with a 13.5-foot draft, we could get her in and out of Mystic. Not have any trouble there.
Price of lumber's gone up a lot.
Yep.
And labor.
Yep.
So,
One question we haven't resolved is what to do about powering her, because the Fairbanks Morse engine that was in her, they haven't been built for years, and we haven't really got our hands on one or would know where to get one. If we did put a more modern engine in the vessel, how do you interpret that? I suppose you just say, well, there it is. We put that in so that we can sail the ship, and it's, as you all know, it's much better for the vessels to be in service. It really is, because the crew is monitoring the ship. She's kept wet. She's kept painted. She's kept looking good. She's kept clean. They tend to last a lot longer under those conditions.
Can I interject something?
Yeah.
When I sailed on the Morgan, the day before we sailed, I went aboard, put a duffel bag, the tow down. This is just to get towed over to London. But with the crew being hired, they hired a captain, they hired a mate, they hired professional sailors. The ship felt alive. You could actually get the vibe from the ship. I'm not trying to be some sort of esoteric hippie here, but there was a genuine feeling that ship came alive. But all of a sudden, I woke up saying, "Let's go! Let's go!" It was tangible. I could feel it, and I suspect that when this thing is ready to cast off her lines, she's going to feel alive. It's like she woke up from this long sleep.
Yep.
I'm going to shut up.
No. That's a great thought. It really is. Yep.
I've got a question from the Zoom chat. They would like to know what design, rigging, or outfitting changes were made for halibut fishing.
I don't think any were made, really. The dories, they were two-man dories, not single-man dories. But the halibut, as far as I know, was just a summer fishery. Is that right? And then the winter fishery was cod and halibut.
You mean there are two-man dories for
Halibut fishery.
Sure. I thought the halibut was one man.
Yeah, not from our research. I mean, we got pictures. Yeah, no, they were two-man. And yep.
They went handling.
They were trawls. They were fishing the long lines, which are called trawls. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Just wondering, in terms of construction materials, are you going to try to stay true to the original construction, or are you adopting?
That's a great question. We have an advisory committee, Maynard Bray and Taylor Allen from Rockport Marine, Nat Benjamin, also Bob Stevens, some real heavy hitters in large vessel design and restoration. And what I do is I float our collective ideas to them, And we figured, my golly, these folks are there. They really care about the Dunton. Let's get them involved. So we've been working through our decision making. I think it was Bob Stevens who bent the seminal Alden yawl. He said, gee, we did it with a 45, 50-foot yawl. I don't see why you can't do it if you loosen up Dunton enough. So he was the one that encouraged us to go in that direction. So a bunch of decisions get floated for the longevity of the vessel. We're going to go to bronze fasteners. So there's a change there. As far as materials, using the live oak in the ends, black locust trunnels, using, really trying to use the best materials we can, because these restorations are so massively expensive. We don't want to be facing this again for another 50 years. Also, what's very interesting is the subject of holding your shear that's come up. So we're not in service in the river as a display vessel at times. You don't really have her ballasted as deeply as possible, so those unsupported ends are out of the water. And what can you do to the hull to make it strong enough? Because in the words of Quentin Snedeker, many people know a schooner with horrible shear, but not many people will know that there are things added to her to hold that shear. So we're talking about maybe gluing the keelson together, which was originally 5 4-inch pieces that were stacked up and drifted together. So having this strength member down the center of the boat. We're talking about maybe having a cold molded portion of the ceiling planking inside as another longitudinal stiffener. We're talking about bridging the cut in the brake beam, which is, really weakens the torsion tube, which is the hull, that step right there, maybe with some steel. And then Maynard Bray thought that we could probably put a metal shear strake inside the oak shear strake that you wouldn't see, that would help stiffen her also. But we'll be very careful to interpret these changes we've made, and if we've actually done some visible things inside the hull, paint them a different color, and tell the story. Yeah.
One of the things that I've seen in some of the boats that lost the shear, I like the idea of cold molded plant, essentially. I thought about that. What I discovered in some of the boats that held together very well was that the shear clamps were all egg bolted together, grips vertically through. The Adventure didn't have any. The Roseway had a lot of egg bolts in the clamp. The clamp was in good shape. It was failing. Still big yellow. Egg bolts really made the difference. And I think from what I've seen, some yards they did that, depending on the pocketbook of the owner, and some they didn't. And with the James Yard that built fishing vessels, they were fixed price. Built a lot of other vessels that were cost plus, and Roseway was a cost plus vessel. See, comparing between Roseway and Adventure 2 years apart, construction of Roseway far superior to its original construction. And I think edge bolting that clamp made an awesome difference in the way the two boats held their shape.
Thank you. Really good thinking there. It's
And that's what we did with Ernestine, egg bolted all that. 4-inch by 12. All those 33 pieces of the sheet.
I don't see it as any one thing. I think it's a sum of many different structural steps that you've taken, even to go as far as locking the cap rail scarps so that they can't slip. You think of the cap rail as a band, that's holding the ends of the vessel up. So extra steps there taken with the joinery.
And whatever you do, I mean, after 100 years, failure, but to do it well, and some of the boats that have held it, a lot of it, exactly what you say, a lot of little things.
Thanks. Yep.
Is it the sheer aesthetic, or is it the actual function vessel itself?
Oh, both.
It's for those of us who build and restore. It's part of the soul of the boat, and the boats that are all sick that we see usually it shows in problems with the shear in a kind of simplistic way. But I don't know why the shear is such a big deal for us.
There's another thing to think about too, is when the Dunton was built in 21, those boats were only supposed to last another 20 years. They weren't meant to last. They were almost a throwaway object.
That was the intent. Most of them only lasted, what, 15 years? Is that right, Harold?
Well, it seems, I haven't looked at it a lot with different boats. Most of the boats, like you think about buying an automobile or a truck. And some people buy a new car every 5 years. Some will wait 15. And anybody driving a 30-year-old car right now says something about what their personality is. Doesn't say it's bad or good. It just says that they're thinking differently than the average person.
I have a 22-year-old Camry that has 300,000 miles. What does that say?
So some of the boats in Gloucester really lasted a long time. Certain individuals, Charlie Raymond had a lobster boat that just sold. I had built what I've seen about the boats that really last is a lot of times it's the maintenance schedule. Charlie took care of the boats. He fished offshore in the winter, lobstering year round, 6 days out, 2-day turnarounds. You're going to do that. I mean, everything was always considered work and I think that.
They got 50 years out of our side trawler Rowan, timber built vessel in Maine, and she was still working and earning at the age of 50. But when she got taken out of service, she went downhill really quickly. But that was a pretty good working life, really.
Things are different today. When
We built Amistad in 2000, so she's 24 years old, and now she is just starting to have some issues. Not huge, but just starting. But we use premium materials in her construction, and we have issues with the stanchions letting water in. It's very common in corners of the transom. But other than that, the vessel's doing pretty well. Any other questions?
Are there any other projects of this magnitude going on the East Coast?
We've got other large vessels in the yard we're working on for customers. We're rebuilding the 1607 immigrant ship from Jamestown Settlement. It's a replica that was built 30 years ago. We're retopping it from the water line up. And we have hopefully Roseway on the docket. We have the Schooner Virginia, which is a replica, coming up to do some work on her. One of the things that Mystic has, which is a great advantage, is the 500-ton lift. We have roll ashore capability and side tracking too with that lift. So we can have 2 to 3 large vessels hauled at the same time, but then we've got the crew with the traditional skills, which we've been able to maintain since 1970 when the yard was put together. Right now, there are 35 of us in the yard, and of the 35, 25 our shipwrights. We rely on Iris in Newport and the landing school to supply us with apprentices that come in. Abelia went to Iris in Newport. And, yeah, not all those graduates want to do the heavy timber work. Many go in the yacht direction.
And are there any other shipyards that could handle a project like this?
There are, but I don't think they've got the crew that we've got.
I've got an 80-footer that we're getting ready to do.
I think a lot of what you'll find is you'll have a master shipwright that'll put a crew together, and then they'll look for a yard and a project, which is the way the Mirwald was done. But we're kind of the only place really where it can all be taken care of in-house. We also have the 2 sawmills too, which is very unusual. We can buy trees and turn them into ship parts.
What I find is when you get up over that 80 feet, material cost. An 80-footer you can build with 2-inch plank. Got to go to 120 feet. The frame spacing gets bigger, and the planking gets longer, and the size of all the material gets big enough. So it's very hard to procure material. Very good job getting first-rate material. So what I find is that the labor to do these jobs is easy to come by, and it's no different than 100 years ago. Build it on a mud bank, slide it into the water. That's easy. The trick is to get that big. These guys. But the labor is, you have a few people that know what they're doing. You can actually teach somebody who's skilled tools to do.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about the spars, please? Are they in good condition? Are you gonna have to rebuild some things?
We've got, we were lucky, we were able to get some Douglas fir sticks that are old growth quite a few years ago. We've kept them under covered storage. So we've got a main and a fore, and I think a spare main for her. We do have some trouble with the main boom, that 76-foot boom. We're gonna have to probably replace that. The whole spar game is kind of changing on the inspected vessels. The Coast Guard is leaning towards laminated now. And we're finding that the second growth fir from the West Coast is not super durable. We're having to make new masts for the Amistad, second set of new masts for her. And they tend to rot from the top down. And we're going to laminate it with Amistad. Any other questions? Yes.
How many dories would be on her? How big would they be?
They were 15 feet on the bottom, which meant that they were 18 feet or so overall. And she would have carried 10? Yeah. Yeah, and so 2 men in each dory. The forecastle was set up for a crew of 20 to 24. And aft, you had bunking for the captain and the mate.
So all those dories went on deck?
Right. They nested inside each other.
Are there photos of a ship with that configuration when it was a working ship?
I'm sorry?
Are there photographs?
Yeah.
The ship in that configuration when it was a working ship?
We did you see the picture of her where the crew was cutting fish? That was
Yeah, I didn't notice
yeah.
the doors.
Yeah, the dories were stacked on deck.
Pretty proud.
Yeah. Let's see if we can find that. No, it's not gonna let me do anything. Help.
Where do you want to go?
Can we go back to the beginning of the slide?
Well, I
Yeah.
found that you have to have a crew of under 30 if you're gonna use computers.
Oh, I know it. I know it.
Yeah.
There's
Oh, yeah.
there's a ship right there.
There you go. Yeah. It's interesting that the main boom is off the vessel in this picture, and she just has her her riding sail, the triangular mainsail, the small one. And to me, that says, as Roger pointed out, the topmast being off, definitely a winter shot. So. Any other questions? Yes.
You said you're gonna replace all but about 15%. What will you do with the trash?
We can't save it all. We just put a new keel in our 1866 Noack sloop Emma Berry, and we're going to save some portions of that. But that's original issue stuff, so it's pretty amazing. With Dunton having been retopped, what do you think the Canadians did or too?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And then we did her. So a lot of what we're disposing is not original issue material. We will save some portions of the keel, but it's going to be discarded, most of it.
Most of the topsides, when I worked on them in the late 70s, they were taken off, the upper, from the waterline up to planking aft. And we were finding maple and birch and cedar. Cedar? There was the bulwark stanchion were a cornucopia of mixed woods and bent over fastenings. This is the other thing that I just remembered. There was from the knees through the old stanchions that were left in when they had, apparently up in wherever that was up north where they did that retopping before us. These were riveted through the outside planking, and they cut a notch into the stanchion and bent these over instead of trying to take them out. So there was a number of these bent over bolts that were not used. They were covered over by the new planking, which was maple or something.
Ironically, some of the repairs done in Newfoundland out of wood that we turn our noses up at still held in there pretty well. So woods like yellow birch and hackmatack, yep.
Yeah,
And yeah, some of that wood is cheap, not too bad.
northern woods, northern hardwoods.
Right. All right. Yes, sir.
You said you were gonna use bronze fasteners?
Yeah.
What were the original?
They were would have been wrought iron, and it's very hard to get that now. Mostly what you get is mild steel with a higher carbon content, and that reacts with the tannic acid in the oak. So it's a bad combination. About 25 years, you're going to have the fasteners cooked and the wood starting to rot. The bronze, it's going to be good for at least twice that length of time. Then you can replace it. Doesn't damage the wood at all. And with labor costs being so high, that more expensive fastener really doesn't play into it anymore.
One of the things we found in bronze fasteners switched from working using steel, iron, bronze. That the bronze has no holding power as far as drift is concerned. I started building the boats with the bronze fasteners. And to really redesign a lot of the ways that things were done, because the only way you could get a bronze fastener to hold was to put a nut on each end, tighten it up. And are you gonna redesign things?
Well, that's a great point. This stuff really is slippery. Where we use it for drifts, we'll nick it up. and make it rough, but you're right, where her backbone, keel and floor fasteners were drifts before, will be through bolting. Right, right.
And I tried, you know, it's funny, in fact, we tried that nicking it up and all that. The thing that shocked me was to go to lobster, it's 30 years old, take all the fasteners on the floor to pull it right out. Around a 5/8 bronze drift.
There was a drift without
But
any,
if you had the
yeah,
nut on it, it was different.
right.
If it was iron,
Yeah.
it never moved, so.
One thing, you gotta realize that I would say at least 80% of the hull planking is held on with black locust funnels. So they hold beautifully. And, it's the butts that are fastened. And are there hanging spikes in Dunton's planking?
I want to say that I believe that the planking gang would get planks out and they would hang the planks on with strategically placed every so often a galvanized iron spike and the butts. And then the guy who was doing the trunneling or gang would come behind it and trunnel in all the rest of the fastenings on the plank.
The term in Essex, when you ask somebody about how to plank a boat, they'd say, spike the sets and butts and trunnel the rest.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that you said, other Essex term that I heard, keep your line straight and good ends up.
And
There's a lot of
I'd like to point out that Morgan is not fastened with iron below the water line. And 1841, we took off the original bottom only 15 years ago. And it's astonishing how well the bronze worked and copper worked there.
Was it spikes?
It was combination of square nails and round spikes.
there was bronze, there was some heavy bronze, like square spikes. There was what they called a round bronze butt spike, which was smooth. And I also want to say, some of the drifts, bronze drifts that when I was working there, we would take it, like you said, rough it up. We would take a coal chisel on the shank and make burrs in it, like a little fish hook burrs kind of because they were slippery, and they would hopefully hold.
But I know Morgan, if her bottom had been iron fastened, there's no way we'd have her today. The whale ships were really built with
We did the Ernestine.
wonderful materials.
Taylor Allen said screws and door. 3/4 inch, 10 wood screws. And drove them. There's a guy up there in Lake Super came up there and every night had it was 1/2 inch. It was a 1/2 inch socket to run those things right in. When I suggested it, everyone hated me. They were done.
When Roger and I were putting Amistad together, we used bronze lag screws. And one of the beautiful things about that is you can be wrapping a big, heavy steam plank into place. You can actually haul with a lag screw. And we put smaller diameter washers on, so we weren't putting big bungs in that were going to really reduce the strength of the plank.
We were contemplating lags. Taylor found out where Taylor Allen told me where to procure those screws. It was nicer than a lag because it had that conical head.
Yep.
Pulled right in.
Yep.
You didn't have a wash aid. And, we used lags and bolts and things.
Right.
Those screws work really well and they're available through top-notch fasteners.
Cool. All right. Anything else? Any other questions? I got one thing to show you before you go. Yes.
Just on the design, that mainmast, is that raked?
Yeah, it's
Slightly.
got slight rake to it. Yeah.
And it's intentional design like that?
So we have a beautiful model that was made by our friend Peter Roos to Roger Shear. Show it to you here. So this will give you a good idea of what we're aspiring to do with her. She was painted black top sides. But Peter actually put little stanchions in behind the bulwarks. You can see it. So this was it's one of our friends, not an employee, just inspired by the ship. And he went ahead and I can't imagine how many hours it took him to put this together. Nice
Can we
thing
show
to
the
have.
people online too, please?
Which way?
In your camera, on the computer.
Okay. LA Dunton model made by Peter Roos. 1/4 inch to the foot with the proper shear that she ought to have. Well, thank you very much.